Hello and welcome to So Good We Named It, fresh from Golden Con, the first Golden Girls and Golden Palace podcast, and the first Golden Girls or Golden Palace podcast with black hosts, to my knowledge anyway. I'm Barrett.
And I'm Kay.
And we have an extra special guest today, the one and only Marc Sotkin, who you may see his name flash across the TV when you're looking at the house and hearing that great music. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Good morning, everybody.
So we actually met him at Golden Con, and I was able to harass him to convince him to be on the show. And you are, I think, the first person in 20-something episodes that I have legitimate questions written down, because you seem like you appreciate that a little more than maybe as much off the cuff. And as when I had Stan Zimmerman, I went on IMDb, did my research. And for those of you that don't know, here's some other shows that he's affiliated with. The Gary Shandling Show, It's a Living.
It's actually the Gary Shandling specials.
Oh.
I didn't work on It's Gary Shandling or Larry Sanders Show. I worked on Gary Shandling Alone in Vegas and the Gary Shandling 25th Anniversary Special. So those were two specials before Gary even got a series that were on Showtime.
Oh, well, see, there you go, people. Now you know the real truth.
There you go.
And It's a Living, which had Cousin Magda in it. The Sinbad Show, You Wish, Charles in Charge, Laverne and Shirley, who had Mrs. Caligula, a.k.a. Sarah. And also Blansky's Beauties that had Aunt Angela. And for some of these, I watched the Sinbad Show. I watched Charles in Charge a little bit. And I definitely watched Laverne and Shirley. I even got in high school the choir teacher to do all theme song performance, and that was one of them, and we acted out the Schlemiel, Schlemazel, and everything. And for It's a Living, I'd never seen it, but because I'm a TV nerd, I used to get CDs. I don't think they still make them with all theme songs, and that was one of them. And I'm like, I don't even know what this show is, but I'm singing the song just because I had the CD. But you've done a whole lot of stuff other than the Golden Girls. Would you say the Golden Girls is what you're most known for?
Yeah, probably. I mean, Laverne and Shirley was also a big hit show. Mm-hmm. So, but many more years ago than Golden Girls. So, the audience size is shrinking because younger people, and it's occasionally on, they'll do something on Nick at Night or something that where they'll do, a Laverne and Shirley thing, but, so it's just not as available. So not as many people are aware of it.
And I have to ask about Blansky's Beauties, which I did watch a little bit of that. And I looked up, that Nancy Walker had quite a few shows that they tried to give her as to be her show. And none of them really took off. And she's so hilarious. Do you have any insight as to why she just couldn't get a good vehicle for her after Rhoda?
Some people are great support actors. They just are. I mean, there's been any number of people who have, they've tried to get hit shows for. McLean Stevenson, if you remember McLean Stevenson, it was great in MASH. It's happened, she's not alone. It's happened to a lot of people who have just iconic characters that they played but weren't leads. Mm-hmm. And, to have it show that the planets have to align. I mean, you have to have great writing, great acting, a great time slot. So much has to happen for things to go wrong rather than right. So, for me, yeah. And that show was not a great show. Blansky's Beauty was not a great show.
Yeah, I think,
but for some reason, Gary Marshall desperately, he tried it in any number of ways. It later became Who's Watching the Kids, and so little back history. I was hired on Laverne and Shirley. So Laverne and Shirley was a mid-season show. Okay, the girls had been on Happy Days, and then they did a mid-season show. And then they had their first full season, and at the end of the first full season, towards the end of the first full season, Cindy Williams had the entire writing staff fired because she didn't feel like they were writing her character. So for the last 4 episodes, I was one of the writers who was brought in to help to hopefully save the day. And Gary Marshall didn't want me, and I was hired with two other writers, Chris Thompson, who went on to create Bosom Buddies, and at the time was Judy Irvin, who became Judy Pioli, is now Judy Askins. And Judy, Chris, and I were all discovered together doing improv. Anyway, Gary didn't want us to go away, so he put us on Belansky's Beauties just until Laverne and Shirley came back on. And Belansky's Beauties was a show. Mrs. Belansky was sort of the house mother for a bunch of chorus girls in Las Vegas. None of the girls were particularly funny or great. Gary kept throwing things at the show trying to save it. So Eddie Mecca, who was Carmine on Laverne and Shirley, became Carmine's cousin on Belansky's Beauty. And Scott Baio became Chachi's cousin. And Pat Morita, who was Arnold on Happy Day, he just threw as many things on that show on it that could make it work, and it was never great. It just wasn't.
I don't think I knew that it was in that whole universe with Happy Days, because Laverne and Shirley were a little more loose when they were on Happy Days, but then on Laverne and Shirley they made them more, I guess, respectable with finger quotes, because maybe you can tell more about that, why they changed it up.
Just the time it was, they never screwed. They voted or whatever the fuck it was. Yes. The difference between what censors were doing then, when I was on that in 1978, compared to what we were doing on Golden Girls was just very different. Things had changed somewhat. So, and when you see them on Happy Days, Cindy had kind of a New York accent. That disappeared. And the characters just became more developed.
Yeah. And I guess it's okay to be that type of character for one episode, but back then they probably didn't want a whole show based around that, which I suppose I can understand. Were you a part of the whole everybody moves to California thing that they did at the end?
No. I had done a couple of years of Laverne and Shirley, probably 2.5 seasons of Laverne and Shirley. And then I was hired to do the pilot for Working Stiffs, a show with Michael Keaton and Jim Belushi. They kind of wanted a guy's Laverne and Shirley thing. So I had left Laverne and Shirley, and then that show didn't make it. And then it's just before the last season of Laverne and Shirley, Penny Marshall called me, and she was Paramount had just asked her to direct her first feature film. She was going to direct The Joy of Sex, and it was a script written by John Hughes, Home Alone, Pretty in Pink, Breakfast Club, that John Hughes. So the script was really funny, but the story needed work, and Penny wanted me to do a rewrite of the movie script. But so that we would have more time together to work on the movie, she asked me to come back to Laverne and Shirley as the showrunner for that season. And they were in California at that point. So that was that was the season I dealt with, among other things, that they were in California.
So with the overlap with some of the characters, did you have any say on Golden Girls saying, hey, I love working with them on Laverne and Shirley or It's a Living, let's get them on here?
So, Magda was certainly one, because I loved working with Marion. It's a Living was actually probably my favorite show to work on. It was interesting because it was in first run syndication, which means we weren't on a network. So they go to each market and sell the show. So it's on different times in different markets. Like in Los Angeles, we were on Saturday afternoons at 4:00. Our lead-in was Raiders Playbook. There was not a lot of people watching It's a Living in Los Angeles. Except B. Arthur was watching it and liked it. Anyway, so there was no network notes. There was very little studio notes. It wasn't in front of an audience. It was kind of like My Dad's Got a Barn, let's do a show. So, and for some reason, I really heard those characters. So we did 100 episodes. I wrote 27 of them. I just heard those characters, loved those characters. So she was an example Marion was an example of somebody who I said, yeah, let's bring her over. So
with that, did you already know what you wanted to do with her, or did Magda come along and you say, "Oh, she'd be great for that"?
yeah, it was more that. Yeah, the character was written, and yeah, she'd be great at that. Yeah.
And clearly she was, because that is one of the most iconic guest characters. You know, every time I see a Slurpee, I think of Magda, like knife through forehead. And with first run syndication, I know, like for Mama's Family, for instance, when it was on the network, didn't do that great, and then it did great with that. Do you think that's something they should bring back as someone in the industry? Because I don't think they do it anymore.
What?
First run syndication for sitcoms?
I think one of the reasons they don't do it as much is because of Hulu and Netflix. You know, the shows are on. The shows that they want on, they're on. You know, I wish It's a Living was on, because I wrote 27 of them, and I'd love the residuals.
And I want to see it now. You're talking it up.
And it's hard to. You can find them on YouTube, but. It was on. There was something called Antenna TV. There is something called Antenna TV. Yeah, and there's something called Logo that I think Paramount owns. That's another. Yeah. Anyway, It's a Living for a while was showing up on that, but yeah, it was a good show.
Well, I'll talk to my people, see if we can get it on, because we got Golden Palace out there. We harassed them for years.
Yep, that would be great.
So
It's a Living is pretty funny.
Well, if you wrote it and B. Arthur watched it, it's definitely something we need to check out. And for anyone listening, Kay is a little silent because she's getting ready for her birthday, and it's a little noisy where she is, but she is here. She is present. And as she always claims, I like to steamroll her anyway.
And you do. Well, I'm here and I'm present because you steamrolling.
Getting back to Golden Girls, how did you end up on there? And we interviewed you at Golden Con, so I might be referencing some stuff for you to maybe go over again. But
sure.
You mentioned you didn't really watch it. Were you concerned about working on a show that you'd never seen before?
No, I had never watched Laverne and Shirley. I was not a fan of I Love Lucy. Okay, it was just not my cup of tea.
Wow.
And so this was Laverne and Shirley was pretty early in my career. I had done one other show called Sorota's Court before that. And my aspiration was always to work on shows like Mary Tyler Moore's show. So my intention when I went to Laverne and Shirley was just to do those last 4 shows of that first season, and then I'd go somewhere else. But it turned out that it was like graduate school for physical comedy. And I realized what great physical comedians they were, and how funny Lenny and Squiggy were. So I had never watched Laverne and Shirley before I went to work on that. So in terms of Golden Girls, I was doing It's a Living at the time, so I was doing another show when it was on.
And that makes sense. There was no streaming or DVDs back then, so if you weren't at home, you likely weren't going to see it. But I guess in my head, I like to think that anyone that works on a show, they're a huge fan and have seen every episode, but of course, that's not going to always be the case. I was also surprised to see in my research that you were affiliated with the Sinbad Show, the sitcom that was on in the 90s. Wouldn't have even thought to put that with you.
And that was a rough go. And it didn't necessarily need to. Well, so I was the 4th showrunner of that season. Okay, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Okay, that 3 other showrunners have either left or been asked to leave. You know, the difficulty with the Sinbad show, and unfortunately I figured this out many years later. Sinbad had one vision of the show. Disney who was the studio, had another vision of the show. And Fox, who was the network, had another vision of the show. So on any given week, 2 of the 3 entities were unhappy. Okay, Fox wanted it to be a single guy who, had kids, but he was having fun. And Disney kind of wanted it to be more about the kids because it's Disney, him and the kids. And Sinbad, I think, kind of wanted to be more Cosby-esque. So, so it was 3 different entities that really didn't have a vision that was united. So there was a lot of unhappy people every week. So it was not a great situation. And in retrospect, I wish we had just gone, okay, they hired Sinbad. Let's just do what Sinbad wants to do, and we'll see what happens. But that didn't happen.
And wasn't Ray J one of the kids?
Could be.
I think so. Ray J, who, those of you listening, you know that's Brandy's brother, but a lot of people know him as the one that had the sex tape with Kim Kardashian and why she got famous. So I guess he got his start back then on this show with you. 6 Degrees of Separation, I guess. With the Golden Girls, one person had asked, and we actually have her on the show upcoming, about the inconsistencies, and you were saying that you didn't give a shit, and that's why, which is a reasonable answer. But now with streaming and DVDs, would you give a shit, or would you still not give a shit?
Nah, it's, yeah. Like I said, I didn't watch the first 4 years. So if there were inconsistencies from year 1 through 4 to one of the shows I did, somebody else needed to be the historian and tell me, here's a problem. I'm amazed at Golden Girls fans, okay? And Golden Con was just a revelation to me. I mean, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, okay? It's so rewarding how much people care about the show, but you know so much more about the show than I do. Okay, I was worried about the cameras are going to be here on Friday, and I got to be ready for that and have a script ready for next Monday. So I don't remember what tie Stan was wearing in episode 125. You know, and it seems like fans do know that.
And it's part of the fun, and you know you can only watch the same thing so many times before you need new stuff to talk about. So I'm going to say, hey, that table wasn't there that episode,
and I love that you do, and I appreciate that you do, but I don't. It's not keeping me up at night.
Well, if anything, at least we know now, because for years it's like, well, are they messing with us? You know, and you mentioned the Ebbtide thing about how you kind of were just using that for fun. If you want to explain that a little bit.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, people always ask me about the people who know the titles of episodes ask me about Ebbtide. Why is it Ebbtide and Ebbtide's Revenge and Ebbtide, what is it, Ebbtide 4, The Revenge of Stan. So when I was doing It's a Living, I used to title my shows like if Dot, who was one of the waitresses, was dating Howard, who was the cook, it was the Dot and Howard show. And I know what that show is about, okay? You can give me any number of names of episodes of Golden Girls, and I have no idea what they were. So when I first went to Golden Girls, the first episode that I wrote was the one where Rose got the new job as the assistant to the TV reporter.
Oh, Enrique
yes.
Mas.
Enrique Mas. So, because I didn't think we were getting any real mileage out of her being working where she had been, which was the grief counselor.
The grief counselor.
Yes, the grief counselor. So anyway, I titled the show the Rose's New Job Show, okay? And Tony Thomas said, this is Golden Girls, it's a different deal, this is disrespectful to the ladies. And he renamed it Rose Fights Back, because at the time in Los Angeles, there was a consumer reporter named David Horowitz whose show was called Fight Back. So he named it Rose Fights Back. And then the second episode I was going to write was where, I'm famous because I killed all these characters, was when Big Daddy died. So I just thought Ebbtide is just pretentious. And it's just me, well, fine, let's see if they like Ebbtide. It doesn't mean anything. And after they went for Ebbtide, then when I killed Phil, that was Ebbtide's Revenge. And then I kept going until I got tired of it. So that's what all the Ebbtides are. That's just me being an idiot.
And again, as a super fan, I'm trying to connect the dots. Like, okay,
yeah, I'm sure I know. So, because people ask about that, fans ask about that often. But that's all that is.
Well, I didn't know you were
me being a jerk.
You were responsible for so many meeting their demise. What's that about? Why are you killing everybody? Was it just to shake things up?
So, yeah. at some point, how much mileage are you getting? The hardest part, especially when you come on a show when I came on, is coming up with stories. There's only 7 stories, okay? It's like the rent is due, Lucy's painted her hair purple, and the boss is coming to dinner, the cabin show. There's 7 of them, that's it. And how do I fool you when we're doing 200 episodes that we're doing that story again, okay? So by the time I got there, they had done 100 episodes. A lot of the good ones were gone. So the most precious thing is what's a good story? And coming up with different stories has never been my strong suit. Whenever it's my turn, I know when my turn comes up that it's my turn to write an episode, I struggle somewhat coming up with ideas. So there were certain characters like Big Daddy and like Phil, who I felt we had gotten comedically as much mileage as probably we were gonna get from them, or there wasn't going to be anything new particularly about Phil, but emotionally, dealing with losing a parent, losing a sibling, losing a child, that's pretty rich Golden Girls area if you can do it and still make it funny. So that's what led me to those.
And there was never any
they
talk.
were very iconic episodes too, as far like the one when Phil passed, and at the end, Sophia, we finally see Sophia, utilizing other emotions besides her humor or whatever. So they're iconic episodes.
Yeah, and that one, Ebbtide, it's probably the best thing I've written, Ebbtide's Revenge. I mean, it's funny, it's moving, it's all those things. And, Paul Witt used to say when he'd give notes on scripts, it's got to be funny or compelling, one or the other. And I think on that script, I accomplished both. So
yeah, indeed, you
did.
Definitely did.
And I'm not an emotional person or anything by any means, but in listening to Enough Wicker, another Golden Girls podcast, they were talking about that. Just in general, certain episodes triggering certain things. And I subconsciously, I didn't even realize that after my father passed, I started skipping that episode. And it wasn't even like, I can't sit through this. It was just like, I don't want to watch that. And I guess it worked. It must, have triggered something in me. So if you can be funny and, tug at the heartstrings, not everybody can do that. A lot of shows are either one or the other. So I think that speaks to, the talent that they have. Was there ever any talk of showing Phil, or would that have completely taken away from the fun?
Well, I think it would have. Yeah, so there was no talk, it worked. All the cross-dressing jokes without seeing him worked. So, again, what were we going to get out of it? If we had a great story about a sibling story about Phil and Dorothy, we might have seen him. An interesting thing about when the week we were shooting that, we were on, a Monday to Friday schedule. And so Tuesday is the first big run through. Monday you have the table reading, and Tuesday is the first run through. The actors are still on book, but they're going through it. Tuesday night, Estelle calls me at home, which is unusual because they don't usually call me at home. They have never called me at home. And she said, I don't want to do this show. I don't want to do this episode, which wouldn't have been good because that's what we had. But in talking to her, what we finally got to was originally in the scene at his funeral, not at the cemetery, at the church, where Dorothy and Blanche and Rose go up to the casket and talk about that he's in the teddy. In the original script, Sophia was with them, and she said, I can't stand up there and do teddy jokes if that's my son. And that was really that was the problem she was having. So that was it turned out it was just a rewrite. So it was a difficult week for her emotionally. I don't have to tell you, all 4, they were great actresses. And great actresses, acting is an emotional thing. When you have to play something, it sort of takes you over for that period of time. So, that was almost a a banana peel that we slipped on, but we got through it.
And that's an exclusive only here at So Good We Name It. I do find it interesting that his funeral was in Miami and none of his 12 children were there.
Yeah, right. It was all, yeah.
But we'll just disregard them. In regards to...
Did he have 12? Did they have 12
It
children?
was mentioned. She said he married a welder. She should have welded his zipper shut. He has 12 kids they can't afford, and that was in like the first season.
There's another one that news to me.
Well, yeah. Maybe they were on the other side of the church. They were there. We just didn't see them. But in the later seasons, it said a lot that there's like a 90s style of comedy that started to take over where it gets a little goofier. And I personally like that. And I feel like a lot of shows do that in the later seasons. They just kind of are self-referential. Was that a conscious decision or it just kind of went with the flow?
Yeah, it was just, if somebody came in and pitched a good story, we were thrilled and we were doing that story. And Golden Girls was always pretty joke intensive. Even I mean, not just when they from the beginning. There's a lot of jokes per page on Golden Girls, so that was the style of the show. I certainly didn't make any big stylistic changes. There were certain things that the previous administration found funny that I didn't. So there were so. And some of it is just, like my craziness. Like, I don't like to refer to other TV shows when I'm doing a TV show. It's like, in my mind, how do they know that there's a TV show? They're a TV show. And that's just my nuttiness, okay? Mm-hmm. They used to do many more jokes about Bee's physical appearance, Dorothy's appearance. Mm-hmm. It was Godzilla, or they were, showing films on her forehead, whatever. My feeling always was... that actress isn't spending 3 hours a day in makeup becoming an alien. She's got to say these words. So that was that's a stylistic thing that I changed. But basically, in terms of the overall feel of the show, it's pretty much the same. It's just, my job, one of the main parts of my job is deciding if my joke is funnier than your joke, and I have to be smart enough to know when your joke is funnier than my joke. So it's just a question of who's making up the jokes. People, our minds work differently, so some of the stuff is different.
Yeah, I think maybe a good example that comes to mind when Sophia jumps off the roof at the old Grammy's house. I love that, but I'm like, she's the one Sophia would not be jumping off of a roof. So it's those types of things where I'm like, it gets a little sillier. But to me, that's fun. I like when they have those silly moments that aren't as realistic, but it's nothing that crazy. It's not like Family Matters. They're not going to space or anything like that in later seasons.
And the ladies didn't do a lot of physical comedy. That wasn't their wheelhouse. They were great at all the reaction stuff. So, their version of physical comedy was like, all three of them would be sitting on the couch and do like a double take together. That was about, when Rose fights back, when she puts on the sauna pants, that's about as far as, once we did that, it was like, all right, this is okay, but we're not doing a lot of physical comedy on this show.
And did you see at the Mother of a Solid Gold Dancer that there was someone wearing those inflatable pants the whole time? Which is, I'm sure at the time you're not thinking, 30 years from now, somebody's going to be wearing this at a convention about this. And with all the shows that you have done, and you said earlier that, you didn't really realize it, like, is it still a little surreal that something that you helped create, people are so obsessed with? It's like a cult or a religion in a sense.
Well, and because of Hulu, I think Jim Colucci was telling me that we actually have more fans now than when it was on the network. So that's crazy. That's crazy. And it's great. I'm happy about it. But, yeah.
I think most of us...
I don't think anybody knew. Oh, go ahead, Mary. I was going to say, I don't think anybody knew.
You go ahead.
As I continue to talk...
Go ahead.
This is how you do me, but
you'll
get used to it. What was I going to say? Oh, I don't think anybody knew, years down the line that the show was going to be as popular as it was now, because I really feel like the Golden Girls has a very diverse fan base. as far as ages, as ethnicities, and everything else. Did you know, or did you think years from now that it would be as phenomenal as it was or as it is today?
Yeah, if I had that crystal ball, I'd be a venture capitalist. No idea at all. It's amazing to me, and it was. I mean, I knew this before Golden Con, but at Golden Con, the number of people. I watched it with my mother, and I watched it with my grandmother. The number of men who said I came out to my family when we were watching Golden Girls. The emotional value of the show is for the people who watch it, for the fans. It's not just about being funny. So if we had known that then, maybe we would have foreseen that those people who were, I forget who it was. Somebody told me, oh, I used to watch it with my mother when I was 5, and I didn't get all the jokes, but I got enough of them that was funny, and we and they were like grandmas. So, we might have thought, okay, when that person's, not 5 anymore, but is 25 or is 30, they might still like that show or watch that show, if there was a place to find it. So when I was when I was really young, when I was probably in second grade, third grade, whatever, I used to put talcum powder on my face and tell my mother I didn't feel well and I needed to stay home from school. Okay, and she wouldn't let me do it all the time, but occasionally she would. We lived in New Jersey, but like right across from New York, which even then had a lot of independent TV stations, and they used to do reruns of all these fabulous old sitcoms, and I would watch sitcoms all day long. Okay, and my mother would go, well, you're wasting your time watching TV. That was probably my schooling. And there were great shows that I know of that aren't on, won't be on, you'll never see them. The fact that those people who grew up with Golden Girls can watch them still and share them with their children, who evidently also find them funny, because that's what I'm hearing. People always say, wow, the show really does hold up, doesn't it? Yeah, for some reason it does. Because emotionally it holds up, and it's pretty funny, and those actresses were great, so...
I think there's 3 things that make this different in the way that fans still react. Is one, for a lot of people my age, we watched it on Lifetime. It was on 6 times a day, so it's impossible not to see it once if you have that channel. Number 2, I think the rewatchability, because I've seen Laverne and Shirley, Happy Days, 227 Jeffersons, all of those, but I don't sit and watch them over and over and over again. But something about this, I don't mind. And then 3, like you said, the emotional aspect, because it is comforting. And I think it gives you that same feeling of when you were with grandma or whatever. And Karen, who won the trivia there, we had her on the show, and she was saying how her son passed away and that, she didn't want to do anything, didn't want to go anywhere, but she would watch Golden Girls.
Yeah, I spoke to her at Golden Con. Yeah.
That's something. If, your show has that kind of power that it can bring people that emotional aspect and laugh, I think that's probably, the biggest key to all of it for many. So, my hat's off to you all, because I'm sure you were just trying to make a funny show that may touch people here and there. But who could know? Who could know that, somebody's really going to be in a bad state and this will, bring it out?
I asked somebody at Golden Con, so what did they think it was, why this touched everybody as much as it did? Particularly the gay community, because obviously it has. And what he told me was, it's the family we wish we had. And he was someone who grew up where the fact that he was gay was not supported at all. It was a bad situation. And it's that family we wish we had, where everybody is accepting, and yes, you may not agree about everything, but if you fuck up, you get forgiven. And I think whatever demographic you're in, that aspect of the show exists. That, I wish I was I lived with a group of people who we loved each other as much as these people obviously loved each other, even though we rag on each other and we're funny, and I think that may be at the heart of it. That they're a beautiful family.
Yeah, a chosen family at
A
that.
chosen,
Which,
yes, and a chosen family. This would be the family I would choose. So
exactly.
I think that's part of what's at the heart of it.
And to go from a touching story, I do want to ask you to repeat your story you told us about. There was a toilet controversy behind the scenes.
Yeah, people always ask me what's my favorite memory of the show. So at one point, so on Fridays we used to shoot a 4 o'clock show that was like the dress rehearsal, and we would shoot it, but we rarely used any of it. And then we would shoot another. We'd go and do notes with the actresses, and then we'd do another show at 7 o'clock. And at some point, Nina Feinberg, now Nina Was, who is our producer, came to me, said, "We have a problem that someone is sneaking into Betty's dressing room during the 4 o'clock taping, taking a dump in her toilet and not flushing it." Okay. Which is funny on its own, but then Jim Valley, who is still one of the funniest people in the world, who was a writer on the show, and has this deep, raspy voice, and does an amazing B. Arthur. And he would do B. He would go. He'd say, "Oh, I did see B at the craft services table," and she was like, "Really, sucking up a lot of bran muffins." And then he would go do B on the toilet, on Betty's toilet. "Oh, this is for you, darling." And he would make me cry. I would laugh so much I would cry. We never found out who it was. Actually, I asked Nina about it semi-recently, and she said that Kenta Zabornak, who was the first AD on the show, had told her about it, and then she never heard anything more about it. It's possible it never happened, but it's my favorite memory of the show, because the picture of B doing that would just be ideal.
Well, in my head, that's how the whole Betty B alleged feud started. That's what I'm gonna go with.
And you know what? There was no real feud. Betty wasn't B's favorite person, and that was it. She was just too sweet.
Which that's what I gathered, because they always say, "Oh, she hated her." Then why would they keep
No,
doing?
no.
They're doing stuff 20 years later
They
together.
did not. They did not.
So I
hate
didn't
each
believe
other.
it.
Occasionally, Betty might be being, completely nice, and you'd see B roll her eyes or something, but she just wasn't her favorite person. But it never affected the work ever. They didn't hate each other.
I didn't think so. I mean, Kay and I work together, and there's plenty of people on our team that aren't our favorite, but
Yeah, of
we
course.
still
And
do
that's
our
always-
job, and we
and
don't
that's
hate them.
there were people on the writing staff that that were not my favorites, but
Yeah, people just run with it, just like, oh, they improvised this scene, and they
that
did
was
this on
last
their
week.
own.
I saw that last. Yes, that was last
They
week.
kill me with that.
Yeah.
So in the later seasons, and we talked about this a little at Golden Con, when you knew B was ready to go, like when Debbie Reynolds came, was that an actual audition to see if they could do a fourth roommate?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
And,
we wanted to see what the chemistry was.
I personally think she would have been great. But why is it they said, no, let's do a hotel? Why not a restaurant? Why not a pizza knish stand? Why not just a fourth roommate?
I wish I had the answer. So that was a mystery to all of us. So, and I think I told you that. So here's the story. So we knew B was leaving, and I don't know how the hotel thing came up, but whatever it was, NBC said, well, we'll give you an order for 13, okay? Not a full season. And Whit Thomas and Harris said, we can't tell the ladies we're doing 13, and this has been a big hit show. And CBS offered the full season, okay? I don't know where the idea from the hotel came from. Personally, I wish we kept looking for a fourth Golden Girl and had tried that. You tell me when you're ready to talk about Golden Palace.
Well, now we can. And designing women, as I'm sure you know, they ushered them in left and right, and they just kept going,
Yes,
and it,
yeah,
it worked for me. I liked all the people they added.
yeah, and that's why I was sorry that we didn't just do that. So there were all sorts of problems with the hotel. Okay. And a lot of this isn't reflect. I hadn't seen Golden Palace since Golden Palace was on, and getting ready for Golden Con, I watched them all. Some are okay, some are pretty good. There were two that said they were written by me, and I was going, "Damn it, Mitch Hurwitz! He put my name on something that I had nothing to do with, because I don't remember any of it." So and again, all this is in retrospect. I wish Susan had done maybe a 2-part pilot where how the hell did these 3 women get this hotel? And that bothers everybody I know who watches the show.
The Haitian lawyer somehow.
Well,
Mr.
in a poker game with some rich guy who needed the tax write-off, she put up the house, he put up the hotel. They were worried about losing the house, whatever. I'd really like to know how these 3 women got this $75 million hotel. Have you ever cleaned a bathroom?
Occasionally, yeah.
Have you ever cleaned 30 bathrooms dressed in a Judy Evans ensemble?
And high heels
Probably,
at that.
right.
And
So
she's
that
like
the
70.
whole we need towels up in 308, that whole thing always bothered me. There was no reason why there wasn't staff there. Who could have been funny characters who we didn't have to see that much, but I never believed that the ladies, that Sophia, being 180 years old, was working in the kitchen and doing what she had to do. So I think that was a problem. And to me, one of the big misses, and I had discussed this with you at Golden Con, there's a line that just goes flying by in the pilot where Roland says, when Oliver comes up, I'm fostering him, and we never talk about that again. Okay? There's an episode later where his mother shows up, but the fact, and actually when Nina Was, when she was asking me about how Golden Con was, and I told her this story, she has edited every because she edits them all and re-edited them all for syndication. She missed the line where he said he was fostering Oliver. Well, the idea that this young black man is fostering this young white kid, how did that happen? Does Roland have a background with foster care? Oliver never. First of all, the acting choices and that was in from the pilot. I thought I was watching Newsies. It's like,
That's what I said on the show.
Yeah.
We were on the same page.
right. What the hell was he doing? And so we weren't crazy. We didn't want to write him because there was a character. We knew the character wasn't working. So so there were opportunities to go deeper, more Golden Girl-esque stuff if we had dealt with the foster care system. And if then the ladies became more of grandmas to Oliver, and if Oliver wasn't playing what Oliver was playing. So I didn't care about the guests who were coming at the hotel or dealing with the hotel. Then we were, the fact that when we were doing Golden Girls, that they were going to the Rusty Anchor or whatever, it was more about what was going on between the Golden Girls.